The werewolf's attack. Blackwood Ranch lay deep in the heart of Texas, surrounded by endless prairies and scattered groves of mighty oaks. Once, it had been a prosperous place, but now a sinister silence loomed over it. Folks around these parts whispered about strange noises at night, missing cattle and a wolf that couldn't be killed. Lucas MacGraw, the ranch's owner, was a hardened man, forged by years of relentless work. He knew how rumors could spiral out of control, but when he found his best cow torn apart, mutilated as if by some savage beast, even his ironclad heart filled with unease. "That's a wolf," grumbled old cowboy Jed, staring at the blood-soaked ground. "But not an ordinary one." "Wolves don't climb over fences and kill for sport," Lucas replied, gripping his rifle tightly. That night he decided to go hunting himself. His weapon was loaded, and the moon bathed the land in a ghostly silver light. The prairies seemed to breathe with something ancient, something wild. Then, he saw it. A figure stood atop a hill, towering and monstrous. It wasn't just a wolf. It walked on two legs, like a man. Its eyes, burning with a crimson glow, locked onto Lucas. The beast lifted its head to the sky and let out a long, eerie howl that sent shivers through every living thing in the night. Lucas raised his rifle and fired. The bullet struck true, but the creature didn't fall. It merely staggered back a step before releasing a deep, menacing chuckle. "Son of a bitch," Lucas muttered as the monster began to move toward him. He didn't wait. His instincts, sharpened by a lifetime of surviving the harsh wilderness, screamed at him. "Run!" He turned and bolted, leaping over dry bushes and crashing through the tall grass. His heart pounded like a war drum, breath ragged, but he couldn't stop. Heavy footfalls thundered behind him. The beast was giving chase. "Damn it," Lucas hissed, knowing he couldn't outrun the thing. Up ahead, an old half-collapsed barn came into view. It had once been their grain storage, but had long since been abandoned. Lucas sprinted toward it, threw himself inside, and slammed the heavy wooden door shut behind him. Outside, a low growl rumbled through the night. "I can smell your fear, human." The voice was guttural, a blend of a growl and human speech. Lucas tightened his grip on his rifle. "What the hell is this thing?" The barn shuddered violently. The beast was slamming into the walls. Wooden planks cracked, dust rained down from the roof. It wouldn't hold for long. Lucas frantically scanned the dimly lit space. Moonlight seeped through gaps in the ceiling, illuminating an old wooden table where a rusted knife with a massive blade lay untouched by time. It looked ancient, but the moment Lucas wrapped his fingers around the handle, something inside him whispered, "This is no ordinary weapon." Outside, the monster struck the barn again. A board splintered, and through the crack, long clawed fingers reached inside. "You won't escape, MacGraw," the beast rasped, its voice echoing into the night. "You belong to me." Lucas gritted his teeth. Why was this thing speaking like it knew him? A deafening crash shook the barn. One of the walls collapsed, and the beast stepped inside. Its crimson eyes burned with malice, and its fanged mouth twisted into a wicked grin. The werewolf took a slow step forward, its muscles rippling beneath thick, dark fur. Lucas didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, driving the knife straight into the creature's chest. The werewolf howled in pain, staggered back, but didn't fall. Instead, it laughed. "You think a single silver blade can kill me?" it growled. Then its claws slashed forward, sinking deep into Lucas's shoulder. Fire-hot pain tore through him, and he collapsed to his knees. The beast loomed over him. "You still don't understand, do you?" it murmured, running its clawed hand over the blood-stained blade. "This knife has killed one of us before, but you don't know who." Lucas clenched his teeth against the pain. Who had this knife killed? And why did the werewolf know his name? His breath came in ragged gasps, but he couldn't look away from the monster. Memories flickered in his mind, half-forgotten stories his grandfather used to tell by the fireplace on long winter nights. "Damn your bloodline, MacGraw. You and your descendants will pay in blood." Long ago, his great-great-grandfather, Isaac MacGraw, had been a ruthless hunter. They said he once captured and killed a man, accusing him of being a werewolf. But before dying, the man had cursed him, cursed his entire bloodline. From that day on, the MacGraw family had been plagued by misfortune, deaths on hunting trips, mysterious illnesses, vanished children. Lucas swallowed hard. What if the legend was true? "You remember something, don't you?" the werewolf growled mockingly. "The true past of your bloodline?" He leaned in closer, his hot, rancid breath washing over Lucas. "You're paying for your ancestors' sins, MacGraw. And do you know the best part?" His beastly maw twisted into a grin. "You're next." Lucas tightened his grip on the knife, his thoughts racing. What the hell did that mean? Was he doomed to become a monster like this? Or was there a way to escape his fate? Gritting his teeth, Lucas fought through the searing pain in his shoulder. Fear clawed at him, but he refused to give in. He knew one thing: if he didn't find a way to kill this creature, he wouldn't live to see the sunrise. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. "Silver wounds them, but it won't kill them. To break the curse, you must pierce their heart and sever their head while the blood is still hot." Damn it. That meant a single stab wouldn't be enough. He had to finish the job. The werewolf, unaware of Lucas's realization, sneered. "You can't escape, human. Even if you wound me, the curse has already sunk its teeth into you. You'll be just like me." But Lucas already knew what he had to do. With a sudden jerk, he yanked the knife from the creature's chest, twisted, and struck again, this time straight into its throat. The werewolf let out a guttural roar, clutching at the wound, but Lucas didn't wait. He slashed across the beast's neck with all his strength. Blood sprayed across the floor. The monster staggered. But it wasn't over. It was still alive. Lucas knew he had only seconds to finish this. Gasping for breath, he stood over the bleeding creature. The silver knife trembled in his grip, hot blood dripping down his face. He could already taste victory, but it was too soon. The werewolf roared, its massive claw swinging upward. Before Lucas could dodge, razor-sharp talons tore into his side. Agonizing pain ripped through him as he crashed to the ground, clutching at the deep wound. Damn it, that was a hard hit. But he could still move. The monster swayed, but forced itself to stand, its eyes burning with hatred and hunger. "You won't get away. I'll take you with me," it snarled, ready to strike the final blow. But Lucas wasn't about to die. Gritting his teeth, he tightened his grip on the knife and, summoning the last of his strength, lunged forward. This time he knew exactly where to strike. The blade drove deeper, straight into the heart, and before the beast could grab him again, Lucas ripped the belt from his waist, looped it around the werewolf's throat, and yanked with all his might, slicing through the last remaining tendons. A sickening crack echoed through the room. The werewolf's head rolled across the floor. Its body went limp and collapsed. Lucas lay beside it, gasping for air. Blood pooled around him. But he was alive. Or was he? He clutched his bleeding side, his fingers slick with warm crimson, but that wasn't the worst of it. The werewolf's claws had left strange marks on his skin, blackening, as if tainted with something dark. He knew werewolf wounds could be deadly, but this felt different. A searing pain spread through his veins, like something inside him was changing. No. He exhaled, trying to push himself up. Suddenly the world blurred. His body trembled, his breathing turned ragged, and something inside him felt like it was tearing apart. And then he heard the whisper. You are one of us now. Lucas spun around sharply, but there was no one behind him. Only the lifeless corpse of the slain monster. No, damn it, he gasped, clutching his head. The pain intensified, his muscles tensed, his skin itched. He could feel something stirring inside him. Was this the beginning of the transformation? Or did he still have a chance to stop it? Lucas collapsed to his knees. His breathing grew ragged. His heart pounded in a frantic rhythm, like a cornered beast. The pain was ripping him apart from the inside. No! He groaned, gripping his head with both hands. But it was useless. The process had already begun. His fingers convulsed, nails elongating into razor-sharp claws. He felt something shift beneath his skin, reshaping his body. Bones cracked, his spine arched, muscles swelled, and his skin sprouted thick, dark fur. Lucas wanted to scream, but instead, a deep, guttural roar tore from his throat. He was no longer human. Thoughts flickered through his mind, scattered, foreign. But through the pain, he felt something new. Hunger, power, the thrill of the hunt. And then he realized the awful truth. He had become the very thing he had feared his entire life. He was a werewolf. The world around him exploded into a whirlwind of scents, sounds, and sensations. Lucas no longer thought. He felt hunger. His new nature craved blood, flesh, the chase. He took one step, then another, and then he lunged forward, feeling a raw strength he had never known before. His muscles surged with power. The wind whipped through his fur. His lungs drank in the cool night air. He sprinted across the ranch, drawn to the warmth of living creatures nearby. Somewhere in a pen, a horse was breathing heavily. Lucas could hear its heart hammering in panic. He growled and leapt. The animal barely had time to let out a terrified neigh before his fangs sank into its throat. Warm blood gushed into his mouth. He tore into the flesh, drowning in the ecstasy of the kill. But it wasn't enough. Somewhere in the house, a light flickered on. The scent of a human struck his senses, igniting an insatiable hunger. More. I need more. Lucas turned his head toward the house. A man stood in the doorway, his father. Lucas? The old man's eyes were filled with horror, but Lucas was no longer his son. He took a step forward, licking the blood from his fangs. The next prey had already been chosen. Lucas growled and moved closer. His father didn't move. His face was twisted in terror, but he didn't run. He couldn't. The scent of fear hit Lucas like a drug, fueling his instincts. He tensed his muscles, ready to pounce. Then suddenly, something heavy slammed into his side. Bang! He howled, tumbling to the ground, mud splattering around him. Snarling, he jerked upright, baring his fangs. Who dared? And then, he saw her. At the edge of the dark courtyard stood a woman. Tall, draped in a leather cloak, with hair as black as the night. In her hands, a silver blade gleamed. Interesting, she said in a cold voice. I came to kill the beast, but I found you. Lucas growled. Everything about her irritated him. Her scent, her tone, her confidence. He wanted to tear her apart, but something in her gaze stopped him. She knew who he was, but how? Lucas could no longer hold back. Instincts boiled in his veins, the beast inside demanding blood. He lunged at her in a fury, his body merging with the shadows, claws slicing through the air. She barely had time to leap aside, but didn't manage to dodge entirely. Lucas felt his claws scrape her skin. A roar of pain and rage burst from her chest, but she didn't give up. The silver blade flashed again in her hands. She swung it, and a streak of cold light sliced through the night air, forcing Lucas to recoil. She didn't retreat. Her movements were quick and precise, like a seasoned hunter. Lucas attacked again, but now he was more cautious. The beast inside him slowly began to understand. This woman wasn't like the others. She was dangerous, and perhaps she was the one who could kill him. He struck once more, trying to capture her. The woman parried his blow, the blade flashing, but she couldn't land a fatal strike. Her face was twisted with pain and exhaustion, but her eyes remained focused. Suddenly, Lucas felt something shift. His body slowed, his mind cleared, and he realized she didn't need to fight him. She didn't want to kill him. Lucas stood, every muscle tensed, ready to strike again. But his gaze locked with hers. There was no fear in her eyes, no malice. She stood before him, holding the silver blade, but she didn't move. She understood that for now, it made no sense to continue. You don't understand what I want, do you? Her voice was soft, but icy with certainty. Lucas growled, but didn't move. The thirst for blood still burned inside him, but something in her words made him pause. She took a step forward, studying his expression, and quietly said, "I didn't come to kill you, Lucas. I came to save you." His heart skipped a beat, and the beast inside him froze. "What are you talking about? Save?" His voice was thick with disbelief. She looked him over, then relaxed her shoulders slightly. "You don't understand what you're up against. The one who cursed you is far more dangerous than you can imagine." Lucas felt his heart race again. "You know who it is?" The woman nodded, her eyes filled with a deep, almost ancient wisdom. "Yes, I do. And you know it too. You're not just a werewolf, Lucas. You carry something more, something cursed. And I didn't come here to kill you. I came to help you fight this evil." Lucas stood in complete confusion. What did this mean? Why was she so sure that he could defeat the evil that even he himself couldn't comprehend? She wasn't wrong. He could feel something dark inside him continuing to grow. Lucas stood, unable to believe his ears, but his instincts began to settle. He felt the beast inside him slow its breathing, though it still yearned for blood and freedom. She was right. Something was wrong. He took a step forward and stood level with the woman, slowly averting his gaze from her blade. "Fine. I'm listening." His voice was hoarse, but now it held weariness and a hint of hope. She nodded, and her cold gaze softened. "You're no ordinary werewolf," she began, her words sounding like a prophecy. "You didn't become this way by chance. This curse is the result of an ancient ritual. You carry within you the essence that once belonged to the light of darkness itself." Lucas felt his heart skip several beats. He froze, trying to process her words. "Light of darkness? What does that mean?" His voice trembled with anxiety. The woman continued. "Long ago, this being was bound within a magical circle, but part of its power broke free and found its way into you. You've become its vessel. You're not just a werewolf, Lucas. You're the bearer of one of the most dangerous entities. Your strength and animal instincts are only a part of what you must overcome." He felt a jolt in his chest, just a little longer, and the beast inside him might have completely consumed his mind. "So what do I do?" His voice grew more resolute. The woman took a step forward. "I can help you, but the path will be long and perilous. You must learn to control the power within you. Together we can find a way to free you from the grip of this curse. But before that happens, you'll have to undergo several trials. It won't be easy, but if you're ready to fight, I'll be by your side." Lucas couldn't believe what he was hearing, but something deep inside him, something ancient and dark, responded to her words. A spark ignited in his soul, a readiness to fight. "I'm ready," she nodded. "Then let's begin. We can't let your inner beast take control. It will try to break free again, but I will help you take charge." Their journey was just beginning. The first days Lucas spent with the woman were a constant battle for him. He was ready to tear her apart with every step she suggested. But she didn't give up. With each passing day, her methods grew more complex and her training more intense. She taught him how to focus his energy, how to calm the beast inside, and how to control its power. It wasn't easy. Lucas could feel his inner beast raging in protest, but more and more, he was able to hold it back. They crossed through the forest, through a misty valley, and now stood before an abandoned cabin. The woman pointed to it. "You're about to face a trial." Her voice was stern. "Your goal is not to leave this place unscathed, but to leave with control over yourself. Here, you'll face someone who will try to undermine your strength." Lucas clenched his fists nervously. His body was prepared, but he still felt the darkness within him whispering and calling. The woman gave him a signal, and he stepped into the dark space inside the cabin. It was cold and eerily silent inside. Suddenly, from the shadows, a figure appeared. He knew it, his own reflection, his animal version, full of cruelty and rage. His eyes glowed yellow, and his teeth were sharp as knives. "You won't be able to control me," the beast growled, closing in on Lucas. "You'll lose yourself, just like everyone else. We are one. You can't escape me." Lucas felt his blood boil, and his hands began to tremble with the urge to attack. But he knew this was a trap. "You're not me. I control myself," he whispered, trying to focus. The beast only snorted. It lunged at him with a sharp motion. Lucas felt heat and pain, but stood firm in front of his own reflection. The battle began. The beast was relentless. Lucas felt his will crumbling slowly as his animal side broke through the walls of his consciousness. Each surge of rage, each wave of hatred, was like a hammer blow to his mind. He could feel the darkness claiming him, turning him into a wild, insane form, incapable of anything but destruction. He stepped back, but not out of weakness. He refused to surrender. He knew that if he gave in now, everything would be lost. His skin burned, his muscles trembled with tension, but he continued to fight the beast. But he couldn't win. The beast snarled, clawing at the air, its eyes full of malice. Lucas no longer felt human. All that remained was the desire to destroy. It was at this moment, when his body was on the verge of giving in, that the woman entered the cabin. "Lucas, don't give up!" Her voice was firm, yet filled with anxiety. She wasn't just watching. She stepped closer and placed her hand on his shoulder, as if trying to transfer her strength to him. "Hold on. This isn't you. You can win. You're not alone." It felt like lightning struck his mind. The dark side retreated, and Lucas felt his inner world slowly starting to heal. But it wasn't without effort. Every breath was heavy, and every surge of power came with great difficulty. The beast let out a furious roar, but now Lucas could control it. He felt the malicious energy fading, replaced by cold determination. Lucas had won. He had managed to control his inner world, but it wasn't without pain. The woman nodded in satisfaction. "You did it, Lucas. You defeated yourself. But this is just the beginning. The curse is not gone. You must be ready for anything." Lucas shook his head, still trying to process what had just happened. He didn't fully realize how deeply he had been involved in this battle. At the moment, Lucas finally started to feel calmer. The dark sky grew thick with heavy clouds, and the air became charged, as though a terrible omen was approaching. The woman glanced around, her expression darkening. She knew it wasn't over. The curse Lucas had been fighting wasn't weak enough to retreat. And as soon as Lucas had managed to conquer his inner self, another trial had arrived. A trial with an external enemy. They first felt it approaching. Faint, but distinct sounds of growling and howling, growing louder. Werewolves rarely hunted in this area, but this wasn't just any random beast. It was powerful, ruthless, and its rage could destroy everything in its path. The The woman immediately understood that this wasn't a coincidence. This was an enemy who knew Lucas. "It's him." Her voice was quiet but resolute. "You must be ready. He's the one who tried to take your soul. He won't back down until he gets what he wants. He's stronger than you. But if we don't fight, he will consume you and grow even more powerful." Lucas already felt his beastly side stirring within. He knew this was the moment when his strength would be tested to the limit. From the mist, it emerged. A massive, ominous werewolf with a scorched wound on its side, black fur, and eyes glowing like embers. Its muscles were coiled like a predator's, ready to strike. It drew closer, and with each step, it felt like the air grew thicker and heavier. Its power was palpable, like a bolt of lightning. "You've lost, Lucas." Its voice was raspy, but filled with confidence. It wasn't in a hurry, savoring the moment. "You were mine, and you will be mine again. You are nothing." Lucas knew him. It was his former mentor, the werewolf who had taught him everything he knew about his existence. But now, as it turned out, his mentor had turned dark, a power-hungry creature that sought to devour all life. "You're no longer my mentor. You're a monster," Lucas replied, his voice filled with rage and determination. The mentor lunged first. His movements were lightning fast, and Lucas barely managed to dodge, feeling the cold breath brush past his shoulder. In that moment, Lucas couldn't allow himself any weakness. He spun around and attacked at full speed, driving his claws into the mentor's body. An explosion of blood, a roar, and the sound of bones cracking. Werewolves were no longer mere beasts. This was a true, brutal slaughter, where every piece of flesh became prey. They clashed in a maddened dance of death, showing no mercy. Lucas could feel the dark energy inside him bursting out. He was on the edge, but he couldn't afford to give up. He attacked again and again, his claws leaving deep gashes in the enemy's flesh, but the mentor did not retreat. At that moment, the woman intervened, trying to control the situation, but her powers were limited. She couldn't intervene in their fight. This was a battle between two werewolves, and only one could emerge alive. The mentor let out a beastly roar that sounded like a command to attack. Lucas felt his body tear with pain, but suddenly his beastly nature exploded in fury. He felt its power consuming him, and finally, with incredible strength, he tore the enemy apart. Lucas stood among the wreckage, blood on his hands, his breathing heavy. He had won, but the victory came at a cost. This wasn't the end. He knew this was only the beginning. Now, on the path to salvation, he would have to face an even greater evil. Lucas stood, his eyes full of hatred and determination. He had defeated his mentor, but the victory had been too costly. The power he felt inside him was becoming unbearable. Everything he knew, everything he felt, pointed to one thing. He needed to find a more powerful enemy, a more dangerous opponent, to finally sever his ties with the dark entity that threatened to consume him. The woman stood nearby, her face a mask of concern, but she knew there was nothing she could do. This was Lucas's decision. "You can't just walk away. You don't know what you're searching for. The dark entity may trap you." Her voice was filled with anxiety. "You're not alone in this world. Everything you're looking for might not be what you think it is." Lucas turned to face her, his eyes cold, filled with despair. "I need this." His voice was firm. "If I don't find someone who can finally defeat me, I'll remain a slave to this entity. I can't let that happen." Without giving her a chance to respond, he turned and walked away. The woman could not stop him, and that was her mistake. He was alone, and all that awaited him was the shadow that followed. He knew that his next step would lead him into great danger. He could already feel it. His heart was beating faster with each passing second, and every step seemed to tighten the grip of the dark forces on his body. He searched for answers in the darkest corners of the land, knowing that only in the heart of the fallen forest could he find what he needed. When he arrived there, the forest greeted him with darkness. There were no sounds, no breath. The silence was eerie. He walked along the dark path until he stumbled upon a sinister temple from which foul smoke poured, signaling the presence of dark magic. Inside the temple, a blood-red circle was drawn, and in its center stood an old man, his eyes full of ancient knowledge. "You've come. I feel your rage, your thirst. You're searching for power that can destroy your essence." His voice was soft but precise. Lucas realized that this man was connected to the dark magic that had a hold on him. He couldn't stop now, even if this was his final step. "What do you want from me?" Lucas asked, his hands poised, his body tense and ready for battle. The old man merely smiled. "I can give you what you're seeking, but you must be prepared to pay the price. I know your dark essence. If you wish to rid yourself of it, you must consume more power than you can imagine. Are you ready?" Lucas did not hesitate. "Yes, I'm ready." The old man slowly raised his hand, and magic began swirling around Lucas, enveloping his body in shadows. An unknown evil gripped him, and Lucas felt his soul descending into the dark abyss. This was where he would face the very thing that might ultimately consume him. Lucas stood, surrounded by the whirlwind of magic, his body straining with the pressure. Suddenly he felt the power he had sought now threatening his very existence. The vortex of dark energy tightened around him, and from the shadows emerged an enemy, a being that could not simply be a mage or a werewolf. It was something ancient and powerful, existing outside of time, a guardian of forbidden knowledge. Figures in robes stepped out from the dark corners of the temple. They were tall and thin, with eyes glowing green, and their presence instilled a fear in Lucas as though they could burn his soul with a mere gaze. But there was more to their eyes than just evil. There was something else. These were the guardians of the dark essence itself. From the shadows emerged the one who caused the greatest concern for Lucas, the executioner, as those who knew of him called him. He was bent and agile, seemingly impossibly strong. His skin was like black stone, and his eyes appeared to belong to no world at all. This was a creature that was neither alive nor dead. "You've come for power, Lucas, but power demands sacrifice. Do you understand that you've become a part of it, and now you must go through this trial?" His voice was a whisper, yet filled with such force that Lucas felt his bones begin to crack from the words. Without warning, the executioner struck. His hands, cloaked in black silk, swept through the air, and Lucas barely managed to dodge. It happened in an instant. His enemy was faster than he had ever anticipated. Lucas felt the air grow heavier around him, and his movements grew sluggish. He attacked, but his claws barely scratched the executioner's skin, as though it had been forged to repel every strike. "You're too weak. Your rage won't save you." The executioner laughed, his voice low and terrifying. Lucas knew he couldn't just keep attacking. His strength was running out, and the dark essence inside him was breaking free, trying to consume him completely. He felt his consciousness start to unravel, his thoughts torn apart, and he was no longer sure who was who. Was it Lucas or the monster? He was on the edge. The executioner advanced again, ready for the final blow, but Lucas, consumed by rage, broke free from within himself. For a moment, his beastly essence completely took control. A mighty roar shattered the silence, and Lucas felt his body swelling with power. He attacked with unimaginable ferocity, tearing into his enemy, not giving him a single chance to strike back. Blood and flesh splattered through the air. The executioner retreated, not expecting such fury from Lucas. But Lucas understood now that his strength had run dry. He stood, looking at his enemy, now barely alive, and knew he could not defeat him completely without consequences. His power was almost depleted, and the dark essence was on the brink of full control. The executioner, dying, smirked, and his eyes filled with a demonic light. "You won't leave here alive, Lucas. You took part of me, but now you will become part of us. We have always been here, and you cannot change that." Lucas felt his body emptying, but his will remained strong. He knew he had to keep fighting, despite it all. However, the realization that the dark entity would never release him forever altered his perception. The dark entity, which Lucas had tried to control, had finally taken over. He stood among the ruined temple, his body consumed by agonizing pain. Dark forces raged within him, tearing him apart from the inside. It felt like two opposing worlds were fighting for control over his soul. His inner monster had awakened. The storm in his mind grew louder, his sensations and thoughts tangled, becoming pure chaos. He could no longer be sure who he was. Every step, every movement brought pain, and his hands began to tremble as he felt the dark energy, like fire, burning him from within. He was no longer human. A monster lived within him, a creature that had gained strength in the dark lands, ready to destroy everything in its path. "You can't defeat me," the inner voice whispered, low and ominous. "You've lost everything you hold dear. You are nothing but a shadow." Lucas couldn't allow himself to be consumed. His eyes began to bleed, and the blood ran down his cheeks, but he couldn't stop. The forces trying to engulf him were too powerful. He felt his claws extending from his fingers, a hollow sensation growing in his stomach. His body struggled to break free from the dark controller, but every step only deepened his suffering. Meanwhile, the executioner, who had miraculously survived their battle, watched from the shadows. He knew Lucas would eventually fall before the power he had tried to absorb. But he didn't expect Lucas to fight not against him, but against himself. "You can't win this fight, Lucas. You're already lost," the executioner whispered, standing in the shadows, observing Lucas's struggle. Lucas fell to his knees, his screams tearing through the silence. He fought for his soul. He tried to remember that he was human, tried to reclaim the life that the dark entity had stolen from him. His will resisted, but his body was weak. Every movement was torturous, and the dark forces within him demanded his destruction. But amidst this pain, a spark emerged. "I won't give up," he forced through gritted teeth. He remembered why he had started his journey. He wasn't just a weapon of dark magic. He was human, and he wanted to remain human. And he remembered his roots, the people he loved, his sister, his family. It was a decisive realization. Lucas rose, slowly, but with each step, his control over himself grew stronger. He wasn't ready to surrender. He knew this battle was his last. His will stood firm against the dark control. At that moment, his inner being weakened, as if it could no longer hold him under its power. His body glowed with a bright, fiery light as he began to gather his strength for the final strike. He knew that if he failed, he would be lost to this entity forever. The executioner tried to intervene, but Lucas had already become someone else. "You won't defeat me, executioner!" Lucas shouted, as his body was surrounded by flashes of light. "You don't know what true willpower is." And this final strike proved deadly. The executioner attempted to strike, but Lucas hit him so forcefully that his dark shell tore apart. He was freed. But the liberation came at a great cost. The executioner fell, his dark essence destroyed. But Lucas was injured, and his strength was fading. He didn't know what his victory would bring in the future, but he felt that he had finally become the master of his fate. Lucas stood, swept with a wave of relief, feeling the dark entity finally retreat. He knew he had won, but the inner fear didn't leave him. With every passing minute, his strength waned, and he couldn't ignore the lingering dark energies still inside him. He was freed from the control, but he still felt its presence, like poison in his blood. But before he could catch his breath, new threats appeared on the horizon. He heard a familiar sound. Footsteps. There were many of them. Not just people, but dark creatures moving as if they were part of the world itself, dissolving into the night's shadows. The beings hiding in dark veils were ancient visitors. These creatures were not mere mages, but those who wielded destructive magic capable of devouring entire worlds. They knew how to survive by feeding off the inner powers of beings like Lucas. Their goal wasn't simple destruction. They craved control, absolute power. Lucas knew he couldn't face them alone. From the darkness, one of them emerged before him, the Shadow Master. A creature with its face hidden beneath a hood, its eyes glowing a bright purple. He knew this was no ordinary mage. This being possessed a power that could overshadow his own. Its strength was terrifying, and its power ancient. "You defeated the Executioner, Lucas, but you will not defeat us," the Shadow Master's voice whispered, but it carried an unstoppable force. "You think you've freed yourself, but you've only become part of a grand game, one we control." Lucas clenched his teeth. He knew he could not allow these creatures to destroy him or take his freedom. His captivity under the Executioner had been harsh, but he had chosen the path of fighting for his soul. "I don't believe in your power, and I'm not afraid of you," Lucas replied, feeling a new rage ignite within him. He felt his inner strength beginning to build again, as if he were ready to fight once more. The Shadow Master took a step forward, and at that moment, shadows began to stretch from his body, covering the ground around him. He raised his hand, and from its depths, an unimaginable amount of dark energy erupted, charging toward Lucas like a storm of rain clouds. But Lucas was ready. A powerful burst of light erupted from his body, colliding with the darkness. They fought like two worlds colliding in an endless struggle. The darkness consumed the light, and the light burned the darkness, their forces clashing, shaking the earth beneath them. Lucas felt his strength rising again, but with every move, the dark creatures tightened their grip on his power. He knew that if he didn't defeat them, the darkness would swallow him once more, and he would not be saved. In that moment, he realized that to win, he needed more than just magic. He needed to believe in himself. He gathered all of his strength, both external and internal, and with a shout, he plunged into the deepest shadows, using all his might. His attack was so fierce that the shadows evaporated in an instant. But before they disappeared, the Shadow Master managed to laugh. "You've won now, Lucas, but you don't understand. This is just the beginning of the war." And the war would be long. Lucas stood amidst the mist, feeling his strength begin to drain, but the victory over this foe gave him a new purpose. He had to find a way to free himself from the dark entities once and for all, and not allow them to destroy everything he knew and loved. Lucas barely had time to catch his breath after his clash with the Shadow Master, when the dark anxiety within him returned. His strength was fading, his body beginning to show signs of exhaustion, but he could not afford to let his guard down. The creatures he faced were just harbingers of something far worse. Lucas knew the war with the dark forces had only just begun, but now his thoughts were focused on something else, on his own brethren. The sky above the ranch grew darker, and he felt the blood in his veins run cold, like a harbinger of an inevitable battle. Not just magic or dark forces. This was a battle between werewolves. A few days ago, Lucas felt the approach. Not immediately, but over time, his instincts became clear. One of his kind had crossed his path again. This was no random werewolf. This was the Executioner, one of those who had watched him long before he was captured by the dark forces. But now, he had become part of something much more sinister. Soon after his encounter with the Shadow Master, Lucas received a message. There was something strange about it. One short phrase that imprinted itself on his mind. "You came here to die, Lucas, and we will be your last enemies." The dark mark on the message belonged to the werewolves who did not forgive weakness. It was clear he had been challenged to a fight. The executioner was not alone. Behind him stood the ancient werewolf clans, watching his every move. Lucas knew they would never forgive him for surviving, for not succumbing to the dark entity, for threatening their power. He could not retreat. Lucas was not the type to run from his enemies, especially if those enemies were his own kin. The executioner and his clans had hunted him, and now the moment had come when they would face him directly. The night would bear witness. Lucas stood in the darkness, feeling the cold and the readiness for the upcoming battle. He knew they would come. Their footsteps grew louder, and finally, they emerged from the dark corners of the night. Their eyes burned with dark fire, and their silhouettes were monstrous in their cruelty. The executioner stood among them. "Did you decide to run, Lucas?" His voice was quiet yet ominous. "You knew we wouldn't let you live. You've broken our rules." The battle began. The executioner lunged first, his claws gleaming in the moonlight. Lucas, already prepared for the brutal clash, blocked the strike, but he felt his strength draining with every passing moment. He was ready to fight, but he needed more than just power. He needed to win. The fight intensified. Werewolves leapt and rolled, creating a true storm around them. Every strike was filled with fury, every scream with terrifying despair. Lucas felt his strength returning as he fought again and again with each enemy. But the executioner was the one who had initially stood over him, and now he demanded that Lucas pay for his disobedience. Lucas felt his heart race as he realized that with each passing minute, he was getting closer to the moment when one side would fall. With every step, the battle grew bloodier. Lucas felt his claws tear through flesh, his strength intensifying with each clash. But he knew the fight wouldn't end until they were all destroyed. Until the last werewolf. Amid the chaos of the battle, where everyone was struggling to snatch victory from the enemy's grasp, Lucas felt his power surge like never before. But he also knew this battle could be his last. The executioner was defeated, but the deadly struggle continued, and Lucas knew he had no time to rest. Chaos reigned around him. Werewolves he had slain lay sprawled across the ground, their blood mingling with the earth of the ranch. Yet this wasn't a victory. It was merely the first step in eradicating the entire threat. Lucas felt his body draining its last reserves of strength. He knew he had to act decisively, or the enemies still alive would kill him before he could reach his goals. He stood among the dead, his breathing heavy, blood dripping down his arm, thickening as it flowed. But Lucas was no longer human, and that saved him. The werewolf inside him had awakened fully, his will unshakable. He was ready to destroy anything that stood between him and survival. The dark mark on his body glowed. He felt the power from the earth connect with him, filling him with newfound strength. This wasn't just his usual state, it was something more. He had become what all werewolves feared. This moment was the point of no return. The executioner's clan would not survive. "This is the end for you," Lucas said, his voice low and threatening. But before he could continue, more werewolves from the executioner's clan appeared from the shadows. They weren't ordinary creatures. Lucas felt that their powers were cursed. Dark spells and the mist surrounding them told him they hadn't come just to fight, but to finish the job with him once and for all. But Lucas was ready. He engaged in battle, his body melding with the dark energy. He felt the walls of the ranch literally shake with the impact of his strikes, everything around him becoming a part of his power. The blows he delivered became powerful, almost devastating. Each werewolf fell without even realizing what had happened. Flashes of that power coursed through his eyes. He couldn't stop. He was no longer human. He was the ruler of the night, the one who would destroy his enemies. Lucas felt his claws tearing through flesh, his fury driving him to victory. When the last of his enemies were defeated and everything around him was consumed by bloody shadows, Lucas stood in the center and looked over the battlefield. It was all destroyed, all under his control. And then, in the moment of his triumph, another werewolf appeared. But this one wasn't part of the executioner's clan. His gaze was alien, ominous. He stood on the edge between light and darkness, like a force that could destroy everything. "You've destroyed everything, Lucas, but you don't know what awaits beyond this," he said, his voice heavy with threat. Lucas realized that the victory was not final, and his battle was just beginning. When Lucas looked at the new foe, his heart froze. This werewolf was unlike any he had encountered before. His presence evoked a sense of ancient danger, a kind of threat that could not be ignored. He was old, much older than any werewolf Lucas had faced, and his eyes burned with a cold fire, as though they were burning through his soul. "You've destroyed my followers, Lucas, but you don't understand what you've awakened," the new werewolf spoke, his voice deep and commanding. Lucas felt his instincts tense, but at the same time, he realized this meeting had been inevitable. This wasn't just another enemy. This was the last of the ancient line, the one who existed even before all the other werewolf clans. He knew everything about Lucas, his origins, his strength, everything he had endured. This werewolf was the one they called Lucifer of the Ages, the ancient shadow who had been consumed by his own ambitions and dark powers. He had become the embodiment of evil will, a forgotten god of werewolves, never mentioned in any ancient scroll. "You don't understand who you're up against, Lucas. Your blood, your cursed weakness. You will not stop what I have awakened." Lucas felt his body fill with dark power again, but it was not enough to fight this creature. His blood boiled with both rage and fear. He knew his past didn't give him the right to win this battle. Lucas grabbed his sword, but he knew that ordinary weapons wouldn't harm such an enemy. With every movement, this ancient werewolf seemed even more invulnerable. He seemed to have lived for millennia, absorbing knowledge, strength, and pain. And then, in the full realization of his situation, Lucas understood that he wasn't just fighting for his life, but for the very essence of the werewolves, for their future. If he lost, the entire werewolf race would be doomed. And so, the battle raged on in its full force. Lucas attacked, his claws gleaming in the darkness, but the ancient enemy intercepted his strike with ease, as though Lucas were nothing more than a child. The creature gripped Lucas by the throat, and he felt his body constricting as the air vanished from his lungs. "You could have been the greatest among us, Lucas," the enemy hissed. "But you allowed the dark forces to take control. You allowed yourself to become weak." But in that moment, despite the agony coursing through him, Lucas heard an inner voice urging him to pull himself together, to use everything he had left. He felt his strength beginning to surge once again. This wasn't just a resurgence of power, it was the restoration of his very essence. With a forceful wrench, Lucas broke free from the enemy's grasp and lunged at him. He was willing to sacrifice his life, but he wouldn't allow this ancient being to destroy everything he cherished. The battle was unbearable in its brutality. The werewolves tore at each other, blood flowing like a river. But with every new strike, Lucas moved closer to his ultimate goal. He couldn't afford to lose. However, the ancient enemy was drawing deeper upon his magic, and Lucas realized that he had reached the edge of his limits. He could no longer fight alone. He needed an ally, and in that moment, in the midst of the desperate struggle, Lucas made a choice. He stood before the ancient enemy, his heart pounding so loudly that it felt as though it might burst from his chest. The dark magic his foe wielded brought with it destruction. Lucas could feel the power of the creature consuming everything around them, squeezing the space, turning it into void. He was no longer just a werewolf. Lucas knew that to defeat this enemy, He had to release his entire dark essence. If he used his full strength, he knew he would never return from it. He would become part of the shadow, his humanity lost, consumed by the dark magic. But Lucas was ready for that. His clan, his people, his life, everything was at stake. He screamed as he felt his body fill with an unknown energy. His eyes turned yellow, his claws lengthened, and power erupted within him like a volcano. All the dark energy of the earth, all his fears and pains, all the emotions he had kept hidden burst out. He understood now. He was no longer himself. He had become the embodiment of destruction. The ancient enemy, sensing this magic, smirked with disgust. "You don't understand, Lucas," he sneered. "You don't understand what you've become. You are no longer a werewolf. You are a beast." Lucas didn't respond. He attacked. With each movement, his strength became more unpredictable. He tore at the earth with his claws, slashed through the air like a knife, but the ancient enemy was elusive. The creature manipulated dark magic, blocking his strikes and conjuring deadly spells. And then, in the moment of extreme tension, Lucas realized that mere magic wouldn't bring him victory. He had to break the cycle and strike with something his enemy didn't expect. He leaped. With incredible speed, he appeared right in front of the ancient enemy. But in that moment, his foe unleashed all his power to create a deadly vortex of dark energy. Lucas felt his body tear apart from the pain, his blood burning. But despite it all, he struck. His claws sank into the enemy's flesh, and with each passing moment, his power drained his opponent. The dark energy grew so strong that even the ancient enemy could no longer resist. "You're finished," Lucas whispered, feeling the enemy begin to vanish beneath his power. With a final growl, the ancient enemy disappeared, dissolving into the shadows. Lucas stood, his body torn, but his gaze was resolute. He had won. But the cost was high. He felt his own life slipping away, the dark energy seeping into his deepest core. Lucas knew he would never return to his former self. He had become what he had always feared. Meanwhile, everything around him began to collapse. The dark magic faded, but there was only emptiness left, a void Lucas couldn't resist. He fell to his knees, clinging to his form with his last strength. But his internal power was quickly fading. Lucas knelt, his energy drained, but he refused to fall. He couldn't allow himself to lose. He knew, if he fell, his victory would be meaningless. The enemy that had departed was only the beginning. The deadly shadow that had consumed everything around him was growing stronger with each passing moment. Something was wrong. In the emptiness left after the ancient enemy's fall, a new energy flared to life, much more sinister. Lucas felt it before he saw it. It was a sensation that had never left him, an omen of a new threat. And this threat was far stronger, much stronger. The shadow seemed to come alive before him. It was no longer just dark magic or an entity. It was an unimaginable force hidden deep within the heart of the ancient lands. If Lucas couldn't stop it, the world of werewolves would be swallowed forever. And then, from the dark corners, a creature emerged. It was massive, black, with glowing red eyes, as though darkness itself had taken form. With every step it took, the ground beneath Lucas trembled. This was something Lucas could never have imagined. "You've won, Lucas, but the price of victory is too high." The voice was deep, resonating inside his head. He couldn't shake the feeling that before him stood not just a new enemy, but the very darkness that had manipulated all werewolves throughout the centuries. "What are you?" Lucas gasped, trying to rise, but his strength was fading. "I am the Lord of Shadows. You think you've defeated your enemy? You've freed me, Lucas. You have no idea what you've done." The Lord of Shadows, a being of whom only the darkest legends were told. It had been the cause of countless catastrophes and destructions, yet it always remained hidden. Now, with the fall of the ancient enemy, it had been released and risen from the depths of magic. Its power was so overwhelming that it seemed to warp reality itself. Lucas knew he couldn't defeat the Lord of Shadows alone. He felt his strength draining, but one thing was clear. If he didn't act now, everything he had fought for would be in vain. Lucas stood fully in the Lord's shadow, his body seemingly burning from the dark energy that surrounded him. Yet his resolve did not falter. He began to gather his remaining strength, knowing this battle would be decisive. Lucas growled, and his power flared up once more. But now he understood that he had to do more than just fight the Lord of Shadows. He had to find a way to destroy its magic. He struck, and the battle that began as a clash of two entities soon escalated into something epic. Dark lightning and magical explosions filled the air as Lucas and the Lord of Shadows collided in a furious struggle, ripping apart the space around them. Lucas felt his energy depleting, but before him stood an unwavering resolve. He knew he had no choice. Hesitation had long since passed. The Lord of Shadows was not just an enemy. It was the embodiment of darkness itself, evil incarnate, the very thing werewolves, mages, and all creatures feared. But Lucas was ready to see it through to the end. The Lord of Shadows sneered, watching Lucas rise again, gathering the last of his strength. "You're too weak to defeat me, Lucas. Like all the others, you serve the shadow, for you will become part of it." Lucas roared, his cry filled with rage, fear, and determination. He was no longer just a werewolf. He was a warrior, fighting for his people, for freedom, for everything that had been lost. He gathered the last remnants of his energy and released it in a final, decisive strike. In that moment, Lucas was stronger than ever, but he also knew that this blow could very well be his last. He leaped, and the dark magic of the Lord of Shadows pierced his body like lightning. But Lucas, it seemed, felt no pain. His entire being was focused on one singular moment, a powerful, fatal blow aimed straight at the Lord of Shadows' very soul. With a mighty roar, Lucas drove his claws into the enemy's chest. The Lord of Shadows tried to push him away, but it was too late. A blend of dark magic, fury, and human resolve overwhelmed the Lord, and he exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The dark entity vanished like mist, dissipating into the air, but the cost had been high. Lucas felt his own strength fading with every breath. He could no longer contain the dark magic that now fully consumed him. His body was on fire, his blood frozen in his veins, and he knew this was the end. With one last look at the world, Lucas fell to his knees, and his body was engulfed by the shadow. He was not afraid of death. He understood that his life had not been in vain. He had saved his people, destroyed the Lord of Shadows, and ended the nightmares that had haunted their world. In that moment, as his soul slipped away, he felt a part of his magic drift into the unknown, leaving behind a mark, a symbol that would be remembered by his entire tribe. Epilogue. Lucas will not return. His story is finished, but his sacrifice became a symbol for all werewolves. The shadow of the Lord had been shattered, but it still left its mark on the world. Yet the new generation of werewolves knew, despite the heavy darkness and trials, there would always be one who would rise to protect them.